Len again. So today we're going to be working on this project. It's a ring dish and it's a multi-step piece project. It's not as simple as the last piece I made, but it's pretty simple. It doesn't require a lot of cutting and measuring and such, but it will require 4 trips to the kiln. So the first thing we're going to do is, on a white piece of glass, we're going to add some glass powders. See the blue and the greens that are in the background here? And this is to create the background, and we'll fuse that. And then the next step is going to be to fuse a clear piece of glass on top and to create these clouds. And you see how these clouds actually look like they're lifted off of the sky that's behind it. And then finally we're going to be adding these beautiful murrine sunflowers and leaves from Tabitha's Glass Emporium, and I'll put the link to her shop below, her YouTube channel. And finally, the last step is to slump this piece. You'll see it's not slumped very deep because I didn't want to mess up the detail down here. It's very dimensional. So there is a slight slump to the piece, and I apologize in advance for the amount of times I will use the word dimension and dimensional. So let's get started on this project. We're going to start with determining what slumping mold we're going to use to know what size our piece is going to be. Well, this is going to be a ring dish, or it could be a little decorative piece. I don't want it to be too large. I'm going to be using this mold, and although it's 6 by 6 inches, I'm only going to be using the inner part, which is about 4 by 4 or 3 3/4 inch by 3 3/4 inch. So the background is going to be cut from this piece of glass. So it's the Bullseye Opaque White 1330, and I'm going to cut 3 3/4 square out of this piece.
So we do the score line, and then we use the round square to actually break the piece of glass.
Perfect break. It's always good. And since I'm going to be putting powders on top of this piece, and you see there's some Sharpie here, I'll clean it first. And the Sharpie, I mean, if the Sharpie doesn't come off completely, it's not too bad because it will burn off. And really, I'll use this side. Okay. I'm going to be using some frit powders for this. So some Bullseye frit powders. And whenever you use a powder, you have to wear a mask, a breathing mask, because you don't want to breathe in these glass particles. That would be terrible for your lungs. And now if I sound weird, it's because I have my mask on. So I'm going to be placing a piece of paper and this little plastic cup with my piece of glass on top. So I will be putting glass powder on this, and so after I'm done with putting all the powder, I don't want to have to grab my piece. So this way, with the cup underneath, I could just pick it up. I picked up this trick from a fellow YouTuber, Jameson Schuler. So I'll be using my sifters and these different frit powders from Bullseye. So we're going to start off with the sky. Okay. Also, with this trick, it allows you to move your piece and collect any of the powder underneath. That's why we use the piece of paper. Okay, so this was powder blue. And the thickness of the powder that I've put on the piece varies, and that's okay. Because the background is white, it'll give it a bit of a cloudy kind of texture. So I'm going to be using these three different green powders: pea pod, light aventurine, and golden green. So these two are opalescent and the aventurine is transparent. So I'm going to do the pea pod as the background, mostly of the background, and I'm going to put accents with the other two. And the horizon line doesn't need to be perfect. There's going to be elements that come on top of it. I'm going to use my mini sifter for the smaller details with the other two powders. So this is the golden green. And the light aventurine. So these are just accents. They'll give good visual interest to the piece. And there we go. It's gonna go in the kiln for its initial firing. So I'll transfer it onto my kiln shelf. And as always, I have a piece of papyrus paper on top of my kiln shelf so the piece doesn't stick. So this initial firing is not going to be a full fuse. It's going to be just hot enough for the powder to adhere to the glass. And again, about 12 hours till we see our friend again. Look at our piece fresh out of the kiln. I love it so much. It's got such great depth and texture to it. You can see like in the sky, because there's thicker and thinner areas of the blue powder, it looks like there's already some clouds in the background, and here are the variations of green. Gives good dimension to this piece. So next what we're going to do is we're going to cover this with a piece of clear glass and add some clouds to that piece so the clouds look like they're closer to us. So I hadn't pre-cut my piece of clear glass, my piece of Tecta, because I wasn't sure if this piece of glass was gonna change shape or get distorted in any way because of the added, we didn't do a full fuse, so it technically shouldn't change dimensions, but I want to measure just in case so I could cut my piece of Tecta. Perfect. It didn't change at all. So it's still 3 3/4. And I have a piece of Tecta here, which actually already has a width of 3 3/4. So I'm just going to cut it the other way. If you hear funny doggy noises in the background, that's my pug who likes to sit under my desk and who follows me everywhere. Okay, there we have it. And of course, we're gonna clean this. Put it out of the way. Okay. So the first thing we're gonna do, come back to our sheet and our little cup, is we're gonna add a thin layer of clear powder. Actually, I should clean this because it just came off of a kiln shelf of Sinfire paper or papyrus, and it leaves some residue, so we don't want that. And remember the Sharpie that was on the back? It all burned away. Okay, so we're going to add some clear powder, and this will avoid bubbles forming in between the two layers. So since the clear powder is coming out, or the powdered glass is coming out, I'll be putting on my mask. So if I sound weird, that's why. So this is clear transparent powder from Bullseye. And our trusty sifters. We don't need much. It is especially important to have it on the edges. Okay. Close that later. And we'll cover this up with our other piece of Tecta. Make sure it lines up. And I'll be adding some clouds here. I don't have powdered white, but I have opaque white in fine. And because we're going to full fuse this, I'm hoping it's not going to be an issue. And we don't need a lot because there's already some cloud designs that have shown up with the various depth of blue in the background. Okay. I don't want them showing up on the same line. Can get a brush and brush these in place. So we're gonna full fuse all this together. So this guy is on his way to the kiln. Oops. There we go. So this is how the piece came out after the second firing, where we added some clear powder, a clear piece of Tack, and some fine frit to make these clouds. And I'm so happy about how these clouds look. I was a bit unsure about the using the fine frit. I had wanted to use a powder, but I think the fine frit gives it more dimension. And look, you really see that those clouds, because they're on the clear piece of glass that lays atop that blue area, you can see that the clouds are in a different dimension than the sky, which is really cool. But I hadn't really anticipated on the colors getting so muted, like the blues and the greens. But that's okay, because most of this area is going to be covered with flowers. So I'm going to be using some murrine to cover this area. And I got these sunflower murrines from Tabitha's Glass Emporium, and I'll put her link in the description box below. And you can see these are murrine canes. You can see they're little sunflowers. So I'm gonna have to cut a whole bunch of these to put them. And because we have different sizes, we can play with perspective. So the smaller ones will go in the back, like they're further away, and then the larger ones will come to the front. For the ones that are closer, so here's one that's cut. So for the ones that are closer, I'm thinking of adding a stem. So this is the stem, and this stem comes from a glass stringer. This is Aventurine Green by Bullseye. It's a Bullseye stringer. I have a pack of mixed transparent stringers that are 1 millimeter wide. And I was thinking to add to that some leaves. And these are Aventurine Green leaves. They also come in canes. They're also from Tabitha. And you can't really tell because the green is so dark. But once you cut into them, like I did with this one, ooh, they're so itty bitty. Here. When you cut into them, here we go. You see there's some beautiful veining in there. So that'll show up. And so I'll add some leaves to a few. So to cut my murrine, I will have my safety goggles on. These mosaic tile nippers or cutters. This basket, this little cubby with a rubber mat, and a paper on top, because when you cut, they tend to bounce off and out of the tub, so the paper helps prevent that. Okay, so I've just cleaned this piece of glass, and I've cut up a whole bunch of leaves and sunflowers. And what I'm going to use this time is some glass tack gel, because once I place the pieces, I don't want them moving around too much. So I'm going to put some here on the side, and I'll just glue them on a little. So the plan is to have the smaller flowers in the back and the larger ones in the front, with more leaves and stems towards the front. So let's go. So this scene really a big field of sunflowers reminds me of when I traveled to Spain in 2001 with one of my brothers, and we arrived in Madrid, and then we rented a car, and we also went with another relative of ours, a cousin, and it was such a fun trip. We rented a car and we drove to different cities, making our way down south. And I remember just driving and seeing fields and fields and fields of sunflowers. It was so beautiful. And as you know, the sunflowers turn towards the sun, so it's just mesmerizing to see that. You'll notice that in here, in this box, they're cut at different widths. So some are thinner, some are thicker, and that doesn't matter. It gives it a more organic look. You know, not all flowers are the exactly same size, same shape. So that'll help in making it more of an organic design. And a million murrine later, we have our field of flowers. So I'm going to let this dry overnight so that when I move it onto my kiln shelf and into my kiln, it won't, these little pieces won't shift around. And then it's going to be one more firing, but this time it's only going to be a tack fuse, which means we're just, we're not fully fusing, so the piece is going to continue to have a lot of texture. So it's just sticking basically the pieces of glass together. That's a tack fuse. So I'm going to tack fuse these flowers. They'll have a nice texture and dimension. And then once we tack fuse it, is one more go in the kiln for the slumping. here it is, fresh out of the kiln and fused, so all these little pieces can't fall off, and they're very dimensional. Let's see, side view, different heights, different sizes. I just love it so much. Because it's got so much dimension to it, I want to slump it, but I don't want to do a slump that's too deep, because then it'll, these pieces will end up folding onto each other and like getting very close and touching each other. It won't be very nice. They'll start to kind of overlap. So I chose this mold, it's a bullseye mold, to slump, and see it just kind of bends in. So so by putting it in, it'll just give it a slight bend to the whole square, make it into a nice little ring dish. So off to the kiln for the final time, and then it's the final reveal. So here it is. After 4 firing, it came out of the kiln. It is beautifully slumped, just a slight little bend to the piece so that if you put something on, it won't roll off. And I hope you enjoyed this project. I would really love it if you subscribe to my channel so I can make more videos, and like my posts. Always leave some nice comments, and I'll leave you with some pictures. It's Glenn again. So today we're going to be working on this project. It's